Artificial intelligence is reinventing business as we speak. You can either get up to speed or get left behind. The choice is yours, and really, it's a no-brainer. Join Cognitive Path founders Geoff Livingston and Greg Verdino as they chat with AI experts about the latest ideas, trends, and technologies that are creating the future of business today. This is No Brainer.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the No Brainer podcast. I'm Geoff Livingston, and as always, I am joined by my bald brother of another mother, Mr. Greg Verdino. Greg, how are you today?
I'm doing well, sir. I feel like we've spent a lot of time together since we just got back from a week on the road in Austin, Texas.
That's right. We were there for the American National Advertisers Association?
Association of National Advertisers.
I
know it's tricky. It's
hard for me. There's so many associations in DC. I just get like alphabet soup by this time of the day. But ANA was awesome, and we had a great time with Michael and Geoff with ANA talking about AI. And there were a bunch of marketers down there. So we were doing what we do, right? That's right. So I know we have a great guest to further that type of conversation. But before we go there, let me get our commercials out of the way. First of all, folks, thank you for tuning in today. And we are a happy, proud member of the Marketing Podcast Network. We do appreciate if you subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe, punch that like button. It helps this podcast get further out there. Leave us a review if you would, and we do take email. You can also visit us at nobrainerpodcast.com to find another way to listen to us. We are basically on every single platform. And with that, Mr. Verdino, the mic is yours.
Let's take it away. So we are recording this on April 1st, April Fool's Day, but today's guest ain't no joke. So today we're joined by Kate O'Neill. I'm going to introduce Kate properly in just a moment, but first, hey, Kate, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that it was the corniest possible intro you could make.
Absolutely.
Or could you do cornier? I don't want to undersell.
We've got a whole show ahead of us, Kate. For those of you who don't know Kate, and many of you may, she is a consultant, speaker, and author. Her company is KO Insights. We are going to drop all the URLs to all these good things in the show notes so everyone will have access to that. She is the host of the Tech Humanist Show. She is also world famous member of the Thinkers50 Radar. I believe that was from 2020. You were also shortlisted for the Thinkers50 Digital Thinking Award in 2023. I got to take a big breath. And her latest book, of which she has many, by the way, is called What Matters Next. Excellent, excellent, excellent book about how to make human-friendly decisions in the face of all of these super fast technology changes that are happening in the world around us. So again, welcome to the show. And we are going to, if you don't mind, dive right in.
Yeah, well, but thank you for the welcome. And thank you for, did you actually read the book? Because you said you were about halfway through last time we talked. So I'm calling you out on live on air here.
Calling me out. I would say I'm probably airplane time did help. I'm running around Austin, Texas.
Look at him stumbling here.
Less so. I would say I'm about 3/4 of the way through.
No, that's fair. That's fair. No, and just for listeners, I would never ever do this to any other host, but Greg is so fun and such a good sport. So thank you for being a good sport.
She does it to everybody.
I do it to everybody. It's true.
But why don't we maybe to start out, I'm going to throw you a question just to kind of, for people who don't know you, you're kind of known as, not just but the Tech Humanist. It's the name of your show, but it's also kind of your spirit, right? It's in your DNA. Briefly, for folks who don't know about the work you do and what that means, could you kind of explain what a Tech Humanist is?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that the term Tech Humanist means is that it's sort of part of a category of seemingly contradictory ideas that really belong together. And a lot of people will hear Tech Humanist and think like, well, how can you be a Tech Humanist? Because tech doesn't seem very human. And to me, that's very much the point. is all of the reasons why people kick back at that and think it doesn't seem natural is very much what I would like for us to be talking more about. Like all of the things that tech dehumanizes by tendency, we need to be talking more about. And really practically, it's about this nature, this notion that there are human attributes that we have that I think are often called soft skills, right? Like good judgment and contextual understanding and emotional intelligence and things like that. And even as we talk more and more about technology sort of displacing jobs or replacing jobs or whatever, so often what we find is that the kinds of ways that we protect our contribution to work is through those very human characteristics. And so I think that's a really rich space to mine and go any direction you feel like going from there.
So why don't we explore that a little bit then? And I know this sort of idea is at the heart of your book that, we're living in this age of rapidly accelerating technology adoption, as it relates to this show, obviously specifically AI. We've got lots of sort of techno solutionism going on. People are both, kind of running scared and also running toward all of this technological change, wanting to be part of the revolution at the same time, not quite knowing what comes next. How do we, I guess, from your perspective, what does human-friendly technology decision-making look like? How do we make those human-first decisions?
I think it has this really tricky but essential balance of technological innovation and human values. And not all technological innovation is done through the lens of human values. And some of it is not really that necessary to be done through the lens of human values because maybe it's some sort of background process that will never touch human experience. Although one could argue it's never more than one leap away from human experience, right? So I think more of the time than not, when we're talking about technology or about innovation, we're talking about processes that have something to do with how people are going to encounter the world, are going to interact with something. They're going to interact with a product or a service that you want to bring to the world. And it really behooves us to think about what that's going to feel like, look like, be like for the person who's going to be consuming it.
How often do you think that's actually part of the equation right now? Because my general sense of it is that, at least the way Silicon Valley is innovating currently, that's an afterthought.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, I think the context of the book and this last part of the subtitle, which is that the world is moving too fast, is very much the driver of what you're alluding to there. I think people feel this kind of crush of acceleration that, these emerging frontier models are coming so fast. I mean, if you're looking at the news every single day and there's a new announcement about some frontier model breakthrough or we're finally at AGI. I like today being,
My
as you
God.
mentioned, is April Fool's. I don't know if you read Gary Marcus's
Oh my God,
newsletter.
I fell for it. I was talking on our huddle, Greg, did you see that? And he's like, oh, dude, it's April Fool's. So I was like,
Yeah. And he even signed it like April 1st, 2025, so that it would not miss it. But yeah, so Gary Marcus, famously a doubter about AGI, was like today in his newsletter was like, I can't believe it, but they finally got AGI.
hats off to Sam Altman, his least favorite person on earth, right?
But that I think that's the context that we're in, is that people are just feeling so overwhelmed by trying to keep up with this accelerating and amplifying discourse about these changes and what it means for us in different respects, what it means for our lives, for our jobs, for our decision making, for society. And when it comes down to how people feel like they can back up or slow down or be wiser in their decision making, I think people feel a little hamstrung by that. And I hear it from the leaders I talk to. So, but I do think that it is figuring into many of the decisions. I think it is something that leaders want to be able to do. So I hear that from my audiences as well, that people, I think, have a better understanding of this than we give them credit for. Many people understand that there's no part of technology that isn't shaping the world right now, that the world is very much being shaped by tech. And in fact, I mean, we're living in a country where a tech billionaire is kind of helping run the country. So we're very much living through this realization of tech in a leadership role, right?
Firm choice, Kate.
I mean,
Sorry.
trying to be. Trying to be like, I mean, I think it's important to both acknowledge it and not be afraid of talking about it, even though I don't think any of us wants to get particularly partisan about the way we talk about it, but I think it's really important to acknowledge it's happening, right?
Yes.
I went to a webinar that the Heinrich Böll Foundation, a German think tank, put on this morning about how what the rise of the tech right means for the transatlantic relationship. And it was an incredibly thoughtful discussion and a lot of really, really great, faceted discussion about, the relationship of different regulations and how that's going to change the ways that different leaders approach their AI strategy and things like that. I mean, I think it's an incredibly important part of being a thought leader in this moment is to be unafraid to talk about the things that are real. And the things that are real right now is that we're in a moment of deregulation, and that's causing even more chaos for people who find themselves in leadership positions and decision-making positions.
It's fair. I mean, I guess that's like that ethos. It is what it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think to be human centric and human friendly in this moment is to acknowledge that, there's a certain honesty that has to come from saying there are reasons why some of these regulations existed. And if we grant the best possible motivation to the people who are pulling the regulations away, then we hope that there are human-centric motivations behind the pulling them away and that they may replace them with what they think is more human-centric, maybe. But I also feel like human centricity is not at the forefront of much of the conversation that's happening there. And so I think it's really important for people to kind of hear that and digest it with their own clarity of thinking of how do they want to approach the decision making in their organizations and in their context and make better decisions, knowing that, like, I've written a lot of articles in the last couple of months about how in an era of deregulation, it's incredibly important to be having good governance conversations within your organization, to be thinking about ethical AI and ethical technology like you never have before. Like this book, it's not less relevant now because some of these regulations have been pulled away. It's more relevant now because we have to think more proactively about how we lead with technology.
Are you finding that the chaos, the stripping away of regulations, the questions around how this is shaping up, where it's shaping up, how it's moving so quickly, why and where it's headed, all that stuff, are you finding when you talk to leaders, are they kind of pumping the brakes a bit on some of their decisions? And is that a good thing? Are they being more thoughtful as you're describing? Or are they just kind of falling into this state of inaction around?
I think it's unfortunately a both and both of the both and sides are not being executed very well in some environments. So some people are, and then this is very relevant to the books, just to set the context. The main model in the book is called the Now Next Continuum, and very much tries to demonstrate that the future is not as scary or as uncertain as we tend to talk about it as. It is merely a continuation of the moment that we're in. And that makes it really about through line thinking. We need to be looking at the past to understand what we know about this moment, what kind of carries through to now, and then kind of thinking about the trajectory of the trends that we're observing, the patterns that we're observing, what that means in terms of the likelihood of what the future is going to be or to shape up as. And so there's a lot of ways that I think leaders can approach decision making with a great deal more confidence than many of them are doing. And many of them are sitting scared and thinking, oh, I don't know how to make a decision right now. I know I need to pull the trigger. I know I need to put some automation and, roll in some of this emerging technology, but I don't know where it belongs or how. And what if I invest in this platform and then 6 months from now, it's irrelevant because they've moved on to another platform and I've made all this investment. And that's the mindset. I have answers to those questions, but that's the mindset. And I just want to hold space for the fact that with empathy, that's a very chaotic place to be. And that's a really hard thing to feel as somebody who feels like you're responsible for the lives that are the organization employs and the customers on the other side of that. So I think that's really important. And at the same time, I think many leaders are overcompensating for that uncertainty by rushing too fast and too far into the deployment of some of these technologies without understanding the consequences that they may be rolling out and some of the things that they may be setting in place that they're going to have to undo or try to undo and maybe won't be able to undo, or that they're going to have to deal with the consequences of for product generations, if not human generations. So those are the kinds of the realities of that both and is that it is really hard being a leader right now. So this is, with true empathy, this is how I wrote this book, is thinking, gosh, it really does seem like harder than it's ever been in my career, in the 30 years I've been in this business. And there are models, there are tools, there are frameworks, and there's disciplined thinking that we can use to make this easier, if not easy.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned that sort of 30 years you've been at this, and as listeners, and certainly you looking at us now can tell, Geoff and I have certainly lost plenty of our hair helping organizations make these kinds of decisions over the course of several generations of technology change. And we return, or as I return to this sort of theme time and time again. And I think Geoff kind of, does as well of, we were really gung-ho, for example, about social media in the early days of social media. And it's only looking back at it now that we kind of feel like some of the things maybe we advocated or things we did were as harmful as they were helpful, right? And that at the time, I don't think anybody was thinking about the potential harms of social. But we know today, obviously, they are many. You can argue there's plenty of good that has come out of the social web, but of course, there's plenty of harm as well. And, it seems obvious to those of us who have been around, and I think you're pointing to this, that if that was bad, this has the potential to be 10x bad, 100x bad, right? That there are all of these harms. I guess thinking about your now next continuum, or you also speak in the book about the sort of dual risks of going too fast or going too
Right.
slow, sort of action versus inaction, both carry risks. How do you recommend leaders kind of balance thinking about the potential, but also being cognizant of and doing what they can to steer clear of creating potential future scenarios that could be really, really negative?
Yeah, it's a very valid question, and to your point, I have those parts of my journey as well that I was part of a lot of the experience optimization, analytics driven kind of marketing, trying to make the data match up and trying to create richer experiences for people. That was at the core of it, but using a lot of data that we didn't necessarily need to create experiences. And these days, I think we would look back on that maybe with some question marks, like why would you want to do that? Why would you want to connect that data point to that data point? And in honesty, I don't think that there's ever, I don't think any of the data that we've collected or used necessarily is good or bad. It's just it's in this model of how is it being contextualized. So even the social web, the thing that's gone wrong about the social web is the over optimization through algorithms of commercial models, right? Like the commercial models at the expense of human experience. And so I think that comes back around to the question you're framing there, which is that, how do you kind of balance, or how do you think about the harms of action, the harms of inaction when you're making these decisions? And I think it comes down to that. Like, where are you running faster than human experience or human outcomes naturally land? And where are you not leading up to, where are you not delivering on what the potential for human experience is? It all comes down to the human framing. And it always does. Like if we're in healthcare, if we're thinking about trying to make sure we're protecting human privacy, that's great. But if that protecting human privacy means that we can't deliver life-saving treatment to someone, well, we probably haven't quite figured out the right model there for making sure that people are protected and that the systems are accurately reflecting the level of risk and opportunity there. If we are in e-commerce and the silly pair of shoes that follows us around from website to website trying to remarket to us 100 times to see if we won't go ahead and buy it on that 99th time, that's pretty.
Geoff is trying not to smile because he knows he always buys the shoes, assuming
Do
they're
you
running.
buy on the 98th
Assuming
time?
they're
Because
running.
it takes
I've
me
been getting
97.
better. I've been getting
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
It's just, I think those, some of those things are much more mundane and like seem harmless, but I think the farther we take those kinds of applications into lived reality and the consequences, we start to see how they play out in ways that aren't so harmless, that start to be used in ways that deny people opportunity or prevent people from having access to all of the services and insurance or medical service or whatever that they should have access to. A lot of those kinds of things flow from very much the same types of logic. So the human centricity is key there, and making the decisions from that harms of action, harms of inaction, that balance is key.
Important is it to have a real mission to be that North Star? Because it really
Yeah.
strikes me that a lot of the AI confusion or the technology confusion and the, um, shall we say, challenges that arise from even making the wrong decision in the name of profit.
Yep.
Because I think that's kind of also understated here, that basically a lot of these decisions are made to make a buck, and that ultimately it's about the quarterly earning and not the human experience. So when we make these decisions, we're putting something in front of the cart, in front of the horse, so to speak, and the horse being the human, which is horrible. But April Fool's Day, have a great day, you're a horse. But all jokes aside, the thing
How to
is,
make horse-friendly tech decisions in a
right,
world
but
that's
if you're
moving too
like,
fast.
let's say Hoka, right? You make great
Yeah.
running shoes, right? And your entire experience is to make your people, your customers, feel like they're flying through the air, literally fly, human fly. That's their motive. But if you're like slamming down every aspect of consumer marketing that you possibly can with every AI tool at your disposal on the ad tech side and just absolutely stalking the bejesus out of people, and that matters more than maybe taking even $10 or $12 and using it as some sort of an incentive at some sort of an event to make your customers that are there feel better. Where's the ultimate win, right? Like, I think that this comes back down to, what is our primary purpose here? Is it to make money? Is it to adopt the latest tech and just see what happens? Or do we have something that says, hey, this is a great tech, this might be a great campaign idea, but it relinquishes the experience motive that we have, that is
Yeah.
part of our mission?
I love that you articulated it that way because I think people get tired of hearing me talk about purpose and meaning. So it's good
Right.
when somebody else does. But no, I think if you scratch the surface of my body of work, what you will find is that the theme of meaning looms large. It's the central theme of my work. That is that because I think it's the central condition of the human experience. Like, I think meaning is very much what it's all about for humans. And we make meaning, we seek meaning. It's why conspiracy theories are a thing, because we are pattern makers. Like we're like, hey, wait, there's a pattern there. And it's like there's no pattern. You're seeing a pattern where there isn't one. But that's what we
Put the
do.
pipe down. Put the pipe down.
That's what we do. That's where we're very, very good at this, at making meaning from disparate patterns. And what the shape that meaning takes in business is purpose. And that's where I think we get a lot of the discourse around purpose and business we get wrong when we try to make it too ethereal a concept, too sort of light and airy of it should feel good and we should be taking it back to some sort of like altruistic thing. And it's like, that's not really what we're talking about. It's wonderful if you can have an altruistic purpose to what you're doing, but really, I mean this much more in a functional sense. What is it that you're trying to do? And what are you trying to do at scale? And that your company exists at all? Because you could be making money by, this is something that when I worked at magazines.com, and our purpose is kind of in our name, right? Like we're there to sell magazine subscriptions. And it used to be a kind of running joke that if we didn't understand that, if we didn't have that sort of front and center in our decision making, It would be easy to get really off course and like sell pizzas out the back door or something like that, right? But how absurd. It's a great reminder of how absurd that is for a company that has its mission right there in its name
Yeah.
to get distracted by something else. And most companies don't have the luxury of having their mission in their name, so they have the necessary evil of trying to remind themselves, like, what is our focus? What are we supposed to be doing? And that's what purpose is supposed to be doing. Purpose is supposed to be reminding you why you even do what you're doing, who you do it for. The key thing here is that there is usually, and when I say usually, I shouldn't even say usually, there is an alignment between what your company exists to do and what people outside of your company come to your company to do, right? The alignment between those is what you need technology for. You don't need technology for the objective of the company, generally speaking. Most of the time, that's not why we're using technology. We're using technology because we have figured out that some kind of mechanism exists where a relationship exists between the purveyor of the service or the product and the consumer of the service or product. And that mechanism is what we're trying to automate and accelerate and amplify.
And
So if we understand that
right?
and
Like
improve, exactly,
theoretically, like
exactly.
the whole reason to do any of it is to improve.
Yeah.
Yes.
Typically, because over time, some kind of a gap between your promise and what it looks like in practice, a gap has formed between those two things, right? And that gap might have been the result of an advancement in technology.
Mhm.
Your consumer now has a new and different expectation, and you're not meeting that expectation. Or it might be despite technology, but technology gives you a means to get there. In a lot of ways, what you're talking about, aligns very closely with the kind of work we do at Cognitive Path, where we're constantly having a conversation with clients about, this sounds almost trite, but, it's not what does the technology do? Ooh, what does AI do? It's, no, what can AI do for you and your customers, right? Where, you have to ground it in what you're trying to achieve as an organization, or otherwise you're just adopting technology in search of a problem. And, let's define the problem, right? Which is
Yeah.
really kind of what you're describing in terms of, purpose, but I would say a lowercase p, right? Because we went through that phase where everybody had a capital P purpose. And for some organizations, REI or, Patagonia or whatever, they do in fact have a capital P purpose. But then, Unilever came along and all of a sudden your toothpaste had a capital P purpose, right?
I would argue even if they do have that capital P purpose, they forget it. Like,
Yes.
look at
Many
REI and
organizations.
all the trouble that they got into with their board this year. I mean,
Absolutely.
they totally jumped the shark to appease the new right-wing conservative
Right.
technology movement, and now they've angered their base. And
Right.
that's
There's
a
an
classic example of what Kate's here talking about.
100%, right? And right now, I think one of the challenges is we have a lot of organizations who at least appear to be rudderless, right? DEI mattered until they were told DEI couldn't matter. Now they're scrubbing diversity from annual reports and shutting down policies, and right, there's all that stuff that's happening right now, which is kind of frightening, because if an organization believes in those things, the organization should believe in those things, right?
They'll do what McKinsey did, and they'll say, that's nice, you could just cut our contracts.
Yeah.
Which was
Yeah.
gutsy. That's $500
It
million
is
from
gutsy.
McKinsey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think what it comes down to is I created in the book Tech Humanist, I popularized this notion of a human-centric digital transformation canvas. And that canvas starts with the articulation of your purpose. And that purpose is not this ethereal, airy kind of feel-good version. It's that 3 to 5 word crisp articulation of what it is you exist to do and do at scale. Right. So 3 to 5 words, it should really be that strategic and simple. And then when you have that, when you're able to articulate that, then you can start talking about, your values and your priorities and your annual goals and, quarterly goals and things like that, and start aligning those resources and things like that. Then you can think about culture and brand and experience and how you're going to dimensionalize what you've just described through those different facets and those different interaction points with customers, with employees, and so on. Then you can think about data and modeling the business you've just described in data. What data points are we going to collect to make sure, to your point, Geoff, that we can improve the things that we're saying we're doing, that we can optimize, that we can refine and become innovators in the space. And then on top of that, we look for the technology layer. Then we say, how could we use technology that would accelerate what we've just described? And we've just described so well at a core level that's driven by purpose, that's driven by this very human-centric understanding of meaning, why we're all here, how we can all be rowing the boat in the same direction, how we can be sure that, the operations people and the tech people and the finance people all understand the same mission, the same kind of objectives. And it'll happen that way much more readily if we've laddered it up through those different understandings of culture and brand and purpose and all those kinds of things and experience all the way through, like I say, data and tech, rather than starting with, Greg, as you mentioned, the idea that a new tech comes along and suddenly that's got everybody's attention and we're trying to figure out how do we, jam that tech into our processes, which is what now everybody is doing with agentic AI. And we see this every few years, it's a new thing, right? Like it's ChatGPT in 2022, it's agentic AI in 2025.
Agentic AI is ChatGPT rebranded because they failed.
But like it's that whole thing of you don't have an agentic AI strategy. You have a strategy, and agentic AI may or may not be a part of how you accomplish what your strategy actually is.
But you guys feel like as soon as you hear the word strategy affixed to any technology trend, that somebody's like completely off the radar. You're like, all right, dude, come back, settle down, put it down, put the pixie dust down.
Yeah, right. At the end of the day, right, an organization has 463 different strategies, right? No, you don't. You have a strategy, right? All of these things are just means of achieving that strategy. What are you even talking about right now?
Yeah, it's like it would be as silly as, you remember Clippy and Microsoft Office,
having a
right?
Clippy
Like having a
strategy.
Clippy strategy. Who has a Clippy strategy? Like you don't. Like it doesn't mean that Clippy at its best, couldn't help you. It could probably help you.
I think kind of it does mean Clippy couldn't help you, but that's a whole separate conversation. We could devote a whole pod to Clippy.
But like I use Notion all the time with my company. We do a lot of knowledge management in Notion, and we use Notion AI extensively, and it really helps accelerate different things that we're doing. Like if I'm like I just did an interview for my podcast with someone that was booked a little bit late notice, and so we didn't have time. I have a human research team, an actual team that does the research, but they do wonderful research dossiers on my interview guests and formatted questions that kind of help me lead into the interview. They didn't have time with this guest, but I asked Notion, based on these other existing templates, see if you can pull together a format like this for this guest. It did pretty well. It did a pretty good job of that, and I think that's incredible. I think it's incredible that we have the tools today that can facilitate that kind of work, that can fill in the gaps where processes may have an opening or where time is tight or whatever. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to fire my research team and start using only AI. It means that I, a savvy business person, am looking for ways to use the tool where it's appropriate and how it's appropriate and only at the level that it's appropriate. But I still can marvel at the fact that it did a really good job. And it got me through this interview, and I'm really grateful that it did. And now I'm going to have my next several interviews, filled by the research team and move on. I don't think that every time we see some remarkable demonstration of tech prowess that means like we got to throw everything away and replace human workers with tech.
Yeah, although that seems to be a dominant thread in the narrative, right?
Efficiency.
Where generative AI of all things is now this sort of machine for efficiency, and you've got Sam Altman, famously, what was it, a year ago or so at this point, was saying how 90% of all marketing roles and tasks could be replaced with AI. You had a CEO, like the CEO of Klarna, believed it, right, and
Yes.
fired the entire customer care team, the entire marketing department. Although I believe on a more recent earnings call, he said something about how the human touch is essential to their business. So clearly there's a little bit of sort of reality snuck into that whole move. But the sort of the thought process you just used as, a leader of your own organization to make the decision that you will use technology in ways that certainly deliver value, accelerate process, filling gaps, et cetera, but not then use that as the crutch to say, fantastic, now I can lay off 3 human researchers. See, that sort of that grounding sometimes seems to be missing in business decisions, right? We live in a capitalist economy and everyone's always looking for ways to drop the savings to the bottom line. How should leaders reorient their mindset to kind of keep the human and the value of the human worker at the center of those kinds of decisions so they don't go running in the wrong direction and get rid of their 40 content marketers because they think they can?
Yeah, I think that some of this comes down to we're kidding ourselves sometimes, right? We're kidding ourselves if we think that the quality is the same. We're kidding ourselves if we think that the output really speaks to people the way that the human output does. And there are real opportunities to innovate and use technology tools or processes in novel ways that maybe do change the workflows in different respects. And we have to be open to those opportunities. But I think we have to be doing that in an emotionally and intellectually honest way that isn't driven primarily by the religion of efficiency and the religion of profit, right? Profit is super important. It's the lifeblood of business. It's what keeps businesses healthy, and we absolutely need to think about that ratio. But that's all it is. Profit is a ratio, and profit is only a ratio telling you if you have the right relationship between what's happening on one level of your business and what's happening on another level of your business, right? It shouldn't be how you're driven to make decisions. That ratio should never be with the only thing that's telling you the health of your business. It would be like the stupidity of using BMI, body mass index, which, now the medical field has basically discredited as being
Yeah.
a silly metric, right?
I'm still overweight, apparently, even though I run marathons and the whole 9 yards.
As
Yeah.
am I, but in my case, it's true.
It's those chunky, heavy glasses that you wear. That's the only thing
They
that's
are.
bogging you
They are.
down.
I mean, those. What are they? Those Gucci's? I don't know.
I don't think a smart person like you can get away with wearing anything less than those chunky glasses, though, because they really say, I am a smart person. You must listen to what I say.
You know who I am.
I think it is. I think it's true though that there are incredible opportunities to use technology in novel ways to change and evolve our processes, to change and evolve our companies, and I think we need to do that with great care and with great consideration for what it is we lose when we lose the human part of that. We lose so much nuance. We lose so much meaning. Nuance is meaning. We lose context. We lose culture. We lose emotional intelligence. If we feel like we can have that, if we can make up for that in ways that other types of processes will deliver more value or more quality or something, then by all means, that's a considered decision, and I wouldn't want to hamper that decision. But I do feel like many of these decisions are being made too rapidly, too in absence of the nuance of the criteria of what we're actually using to evaluate.
What do you think it'll take to move that pendulum back on a trend perspective?
I don't know if there's a moving it back. I think we're on a, I don't want to say a forever accelerating pace, but don't you guys feel like, I mean, I don't see us slowing down. I think this is the nature of things. We've got,
More from like a human perspective,
yeah,
that balance.
my
You
book,
don't see it?
my book.
Yeah.
No, I think that it's changing the discourse. I think that it's changing, changing business schools, the curriculum at business schools. It's letting that catch up. It's having this conversation amongst, EO and YPO and all the other executive kind of gatherings, making sure that folks are having these kinds of conversations about how you decide when and where tech fits into your organization. And it's not a new conversation. It's a conversation that's been going on for decades, but I think that it gets increasingly loud and increasingly important when it so readily feels like, you mean I can plug in an AI agent system and replace 15,000 workers and get that savings on the bottom line instantly? I'm like, yeah, do that. Well, that is not a very considered decision. That's not looking at the full range of outcomes and impacts and consequences. And I think this is an area that more of business is getting more interconnected because of the ways in which systems connect businesses. Like, so businesses through digital transformation, data transformation over the last few decades have become increasingly connected. And that was the whole point of digital transformation in the earliest era of transformation, was put data measurements in over at finance and data measurements in over at, ops, so that we can make aligned business decisions that carry those metrics together and that look at that across the company. And now we have all of that aligned and connected. And so now if we replace a system over here, it very much impacts the systems over here. And all of that is very, very interconnected in ways that old school business leadership does not take into account. So the kind of conventional wisdom that we get from reading 90s business books doesn't help us in 2025, except if it's Peter Drucker, because he's so smart.
I'm a sucker for Drucker. I feel like
Sucker for Drucker, too.
I end up quoting him more often than I should, much to Geoff's chagrin. Uh, we're coming up on time, but I do want to. I would love to touch on maybe one more thing, something that has come across to me very clearly in your work, but every time we've had an interaction, and it is very much unlike me because I am the eternal pessimist, as Geoff knows, is that you tend to believe very strongly and embody this notion of strategic optimism that things are in fact moving in the right direction and will turn out well, right?
No, I don't I would disagree with that. I don't actually believe that things are moving in the right direction and will turn out well. I appreciate the framing of your question, and if you don't mind me jumping ahead,
Go
and
right ahead.
I'm going to clarify that when I say strategic optimism, like when I wrote in my book A Future So Bright, I introduced the notion of strategic optimism, and it is not to suggest that everything is moving in the right direction. It is to say that things can move in a better direction if we choose to move them. That we have the ultimate say, that the future is the continuation of this moment, and it is shaped by the actions and decisions that we have already taken, as well as, more importantly, those we make today. And that means that if we make the right decisions, we can make a better future. It doesn't mean that we can correct for all of the mistakes that have been made in the past. It doesn't mean that we can correct for other people's mistakes. It doesn't mean that we can make everything magically better all over the place. We're never going to have utopia. I think we all kind of understand and agree on that. But what it does mean is that we can make things incrementally better by making better choices. And 100% that's what this latest book, What Matters Next, was meant to follow up on, was that if you believe strategic optimism as a philosophy and you think, all right, so the future can be better if we make better decisions, how do I make better decisions? And then I wrote this book to say, here's how you make better decisions.
Which is, it almost boils down to do the next right thing, right?
Yeah. And then, it's very related in that ideology or that sort of philosophy. Like, I'm just laying it out in a more methodical way to say, look, here, what I call the $1 million question is this. It's, if you do this kind of, many of us who are strategists kind of understand scenario planning. If you look into the future and you think about, some important facet that you're trying to understand, and you think, like, what's the most likely way that this is going to play out? Like, if you think about electric vehicles or something like that, the most likely way that's going to play out is that we're going to have to see oil and gas companies come to the natural end of resources before they're ever going to let the patents that they sort of squat on be delivered upon, and that, infrastructure is going to take longer than anybody could have anticipated. But eventually, at some point that, you can speculate what the number of years is, it is going to be the dominant infrastructure for vehicles. So that's the most likely outcome. You may have a preferred outcome that says, I would like to see that future sooner rather than later. I would like to see within 5 to 10 years, there'd be a whole lot more infrastructure for electric vehicles. How do I close that gap? How do I make my preferred reality much closer to the likely reality? And what are the actions and decisions that I would need to take in order to close the gap between those two scenarios? And that, if you ask that question all the time, like every day, on a regular basis, you are constantly moving yourself toward where you need to be. And it might be in that exact scenario. It might be something where you might work with your city or state to make public-private partnerships happen and have more EV chargers installed. Or you may do a public education campaign, or you may work with, state or national incentives programs to popularize the idea that people should buy EVs. Like there's any number of things you could be doing that in that one specific example that would be closing the gap between the most likely and your preferred. And in your personal situation, listener, whatever it is for you, I think you'll find that there are going to be any number of things on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis that you can be doing that will move you closer to the future you would like to see happen.
Greg, I want the book when you're done.
Jeff, I will send you your very own copy. How's that?
Well, I promise to put it on LinkedIn with my shiny head.
Yeah.
All right.
All
Very
righty. So, as I said, we're going to share all your details in the show notes, but because people don't always check out the show notes, Kate, if folks want to learn more about your work, learn more about you, find you online, or whatever, how can they find you?
You go wherever Greg is hanging out, and that's where I'm hanging out.
So we're hanging out at Gregory's Coffee?
Gregory's Coffee. I love Gregory's Coffee. And they got the glasses and everything. This is a very East Coast reference for folks who are listening from anywhere other than the East Coast. We have a local chain, regional chain called Gregory's Coffee, and it's very, very good. But they use the logo with their glasses.
They use Greg,
but it's not me.
It's not this Greg.
Logo. He's the logo.
Yeah. But I love Gregory's Coffee. Anyway, I am hanging out at Gregory's Coffee and at koinsights.com. Also at /Kate O'Neill, KateOneil at pretty much every social media platform. So find me, talk to me. I want to hear all about the things that you found true and the things that you disagreed with and everything.
And of course, you can find her books everywhere books are sold, which these days seem to be predominantly Amazon, but they are available just about everywhere.
Very good. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to exit out. Once again, I'm going to remind you to punch the like button, leave a comment, tell us what you thought about Kate or anything in general. We do mailbag episodes. You can email us. Please do share it, leave a review, all that fun stuff, and enjoy April. It's spring. Have fun, folks. Thank you.